Hey SketchUp fans, here is a fabulous tutorial showing you how to make this. This is actually the Dieter Rams 621, the famous Dieter Rams in fact, German designer, 621 table. And perhaps what's spectacular about this is, well, nothing really. I suppose it's fairly average looking table really, but apparently it's tremendous. Dieter's an amazing guy, worth checking his work out, particularly the similarity of some of his work and Apple's work. Anyway, why this might be a useful tutorial is it shows on a relatively simple model how to deal with things like these radiused corners. Okay, it's pretty easy to make square boxy things in SketchUp. Not as easy to do a radiused edge going into a sort of a square edge. Okay, so we'll have a look at how to do that. We'll also have a look at how to do things like this, these little groovy indentations on the side, and maybe a few time-saving little techniques along the way. Now, Dieter Rams's fabulous table comes in two sizes. That's the smaller one. So to complete the set, I'll model the larger one now to show you the process. Okay, and here we go. So I will close that one, start a whole new file. Rightio, there we go. There's our little chap. We'll say goodbye to him. See you later, chap. And I'm going to import the little template file, this little JPEG file that I have here, that you can actually easily find this. You search for 621 table dimensions, you'd easily find this. It comes off the Visco site, and I'm just using that as my template to draw over. Just when you bring this in, make sure that you've got a JPEG file chosen here as the format, and you want to bring it in as an image. Okay, so if you recall from previous attempts with SketchUp, you click once and then you basically drag to get that to go to any arbitrary size. It doesn't really matter. And then what we're going to do, we're going to rescale this to fit to be the right dimensions, because I have no idea what size that's come in at, but our drawing actually does indicate set dimensions. So I'm going to scale the whole thing to match these dimensions that we've seen here. Before I do that though, I find this a bit more logical to construct the table in the vertical plane, so I'm just going to rotate my drawing around so that it's sitting vertical, not horizontal. Okay, to do that, if you grab the rotate tool, okay, you'll find that it's a bit belligerent, as are most of the SketchUp tools. Just remember, it's very camera specific. So if you're viewing like this, I keep changing to the orbit tool, by the way. So I'm moving my view down like that. The rotate will then only give me options to rotate in the horizontal plane. But if I change my view to something a bit more like that, very flat to the eye, okay, the protractor will now the rotate tool, not the protractor, because there is separately a protractor, the rotate tool is what we're using, now gives me the vertical plane, and it's also giving me the correct axis. It's showing me the red axis, which is the side that I want to rotate. So I'm going to click on the endpoint. Basically I can go anywhere along this edge, but I'll go to the furthest edge, click again, and then simply move the mouse. And I'm going to move it, as I'm moving it inside my little protractor sort of space there, and I can click on those increments. So I'm not clicking, it's snapping to them because I've got my mouse in there. If I move the mouse on the outside, it just moves arbitrarily. Okay, so I'm just going to let it sort of infer to that 90-degree point. Click, and there it is. Okay, so we've now got our plan sitting vertically. I'm going to change my camera view so that I can see the front like that. Happy days. All right, and now we shall begin. I'll do that again. I'll grab my measuring tape, and I'm simply just going to click on this arrow here, I'm going to click on the starting point. I'm going to click on the end point. Right, now as soon as I've done that, it tells me down here, it thinks that's 1.21 metres. Now we want that to be 52.5 centimetre. So type in centimetre. It says, do you want to resize? And you say yes. Now don't panic, it didn't disappear. It's just made it a different scale, and there it is still sitting there. Now incidentally, if you're doing that same process and you find that every time you try and click point with your measuring tape and you get a guide appears instead, just try holding the Option key when you do that. I don't know why that is. It is a toggle option. You'll notice there that it's coming up at the bottom of the screen down here. And sometimes by default it's turned on, sometimes by default it's turned off. I don't understand why, but if you are getting a problem there where it won't let you scale properly and it just keeps dragging guides, just try holding the Option key when you do that last step. Okay. Anyway, mine is now at the right scale, and we're ready to drag our guide. So again, I'll just move my camera view back to dead front and do what I did before, which is to grab my measuring tape, and I'm just dragging a guide. I'm getting a guide to appear because I'm just starting by clicking on an edge of that drawing, dragging into where I want it. Okay, now what this is doing now is it doesn't seem to be snapping precisely where I need it. Okay, and that's because SketchUp has got its own little internal kind of grid system, I suppose, and it will often do that. It's just stopping short there, so I can see that I need that to nudge along a tiny bit. It's currently at 0.43. I'm going to try that as 0.435, and that snapped exactly where I need that. Okay, so you might find you've got to do those little adjustments like that to get it to be exactly the right spot. I'm going to carry on and do the same thing over here. I'm going to drag this to as close as I can get it to that edge across the other side. It seems to want to snap at 53. I want it instead to be 52.5. Now I've clicked away there and I've lost that measure, so I'm going to just do that again. I'm going to hit undo on the keyboard, do that again, drag it as close as I can to the spot. It's obviously a little wider, and before I click on anything else, I'm going to say that I want that 52.5 centimetre. And there it is. Okay, so I'm going to carry on for the moment and just keep putting those guides in place. Okay, the top one looks pretty good. I'm going to drag from the top one down, and that's going to 46. Obviously I want 45, so once again I'll drag it and just change it to 45 centimetre. And don't worry if you get that happening. Clearly what we've got here is a drawing that is slightly inaccurate. Okay, we know that the measurements in SketchUp are correct, so if you get little overshoots like that, don't worry about it. And you can also see that this side view here is obviously off centre. Okay, it should be lining up, okay, but wherever this drawing has come from is not quite accurate. Doesn't matter, all we need is a guide for this thing anyway. Okay, and finally, the other thing I'm going to do with this, before I start drawing the actual objects, I need to know a middle point. I need to know a halfway measure across here. I could do some maths and work out what that should be there, okay, but which isn't that hard, but just in case you've sort of got a dodgy number to work with. And a really quick way of doing that, obviously, is that this program, as you know, has got inferencing system. Now, unfortunately, it won't work with just guides. Okay, so if I'm trying to work out where the middle point of that space there is, it won't tell me where the midpoint is. But if I just draw a temporary little construction plane, so I just draw a box, okay, grab my tape, now measure across that, drag a guide, it will infer to the midpoint of that box, which gives me the midpoint I was after. So my guide's in place, and I can just delete that box out of the way. Okay, so that's all the critical guides that I need. I could start to put in some of these secondary ones and things, but they're not really that important. They're the ones that are in place now are the critical ones I need. Now, another little tip that I'm just going to suggest right now, as you work with SketchUp, you've probably discovered that occasionally when you're drawing things, So I go and do it, say, over here, in a corner or something. When you go to delete things, it's obviously really easy, and you can see there what's happened. It's really easy to accidentally delete the guides. Okay, so to stop that from happening, I'm actually just going to group the guides together, and then I can lock them. Okay, you can't lock individual guides. All right, it doesn't give you an option to do that, but you can if you group them together. So I'm just going to select everything on this page. Okay, so select all. I don't actually need the drawing selected as part of this. I suppose it doesn't really matter if I did, but just in case for this example, I just want to group the guides. So I'm going to shift select or shift click to deselect the background there. So I've only now got the guide selected, and I'm going to make group. Okay, so I've just grouped the guides as one thing, and that means I can now click on them. Come on, you idiot. There we go. And it does give me the option to lock. Okay, which means I can't accidentally delete them now. Well, I probably could, but it's going to be a lot harder to do. Righto. And then I would now really recommend setting up a new layer. Okay, if you don't have layers visible, go up to Window, choose Layers. It would become available. And we've just worked on the default layer so far, so I'm going to click and add a new layer. I'm going to call it Table. And remember to just ensure that you are actually working on that layer. Click the little radio button there. It's not enough just to select it. Okay, you've got to click that little radio button. Okay, what that will mean now is not only can we draw new things on this layer, but I can temporarily turn off my drawing, my guide drawing in the background. Okay, which will be useful later on when we just want to assess how we're going. Okay, so let's get started. So I would start this in many different ways. You could use all sorts of tools to do it, but I'm going to start it just simply by drawing on my new table layer. Okay, just make sure you are working on that layer. A box going across that main measure. Okay, and at the moment it's obscuring our plan drawing, so I'm just going to click on the fill of that and delete it, so we're just left with a bunch of lines. Okay, now this next step is really the thing that's probably I guess the most critical and the trickiest bit to do, but it's not really that tricky once you see it, and that is how to set up these radiuses. Now once you've seen this one technique, you can then repeat it a lot, not only across this particular model, but you can use it any time you need to make a radiused edge. And I think it's easiest just by basically starting with a 90-degree corner and then draw a little guide box. Now, it's important that it be an actual square, okay? And what I'm doing here is I'm trying to guesstimate what I think the correct dimension, or essentially the radius, is going to be for an arc that will give me the little corner edge there. I think the box I've drawn there, which is snapping at, what's that, 2 centimetres, looks pretty close for that edge. And what I mean by that is this. I'll just get rid of that fill junk so that you can see what I'm doing. So what I've done, that square, okay, I can see that the curve of that radius, I'm zoomed up a lot here, appears to start around about there and finishes there. Okay, and to confirm that even more, and this is basically showing the technique, if I grab a circle, align its centre to that point there and drag either straight up or across, doesn't matter which, you can see that basically a quarter of that circle, and again I'll just delete all that fill, so you can see what's going on. Delete that one. Okay, a quarter of that circle is basically giving us that radius that we needed. Okay, so the technique is, because it's relatively easy to draw a little square out from the a corner you've already drawn, and then dead simple then to align a circle to that corner point that it gives you, it means it's a reasonably fail-safe way that you can get quite accurate corners drawn. And why that's important is because now we can get our eraser and start to delete all the edges we don't need. Okay, so we don't need that, and we don't need those 2 outside ones. Okay, so again, to make it clear what's happened, I'll turn off the plan drawing, and we've just made that. And what's really critical is that this part and this part has joined perfectly. Okay, there's no overlaps or mismatches or something. It's actually aligned exactly in the right spot, which is what's critical because we essentially want all this geometry to join up in a minute. And what this is doing is making sure that happens. Okay, so there's our first corner. And I'm going to carry on. Now we've got a bunch of these to do, but mercifully I'm going to show you a technique in a minute where we only really have to make one side of this table. So we're going to do all the radiuses on this side and then flip it over. Okay, so next step is to do these insets. So I'm going to inset to this next line here. I'm going to start by figuring out what that is. I'm just dragging a guide there, and that looks to be a centimetre there. And it looks pretty close to be a centimetre. Okay, so I would imagine that even though the drawing might be slightly inaccurate, I think that is pretty close to being a centimetre from the top and the side. So I've got my two guides in place, and again, to draw this inside edge here, I'm going to do the same process I just did. Grab a rectangle, align it in that corner. For the moment, drag right across. I'm not really worried where it goes on the other side over here. I'll just drag it to anywhere. Right about that. Delete the fill. Okay, I'm going to delete all the fill for the moment because it's just getting in the way. And again, I'll draw that little box technique, work out where the edge of it is, and that's snapping at 1 centimetre. And it looks pretty close. I could probably go a touch bigger actually, so I might do that. I'm going to make that box maybe 1.2 centimetres by 1.2 centimetres. Makes it slightly bigger. Describe a circle from that corner straight up, and now just go in and delete all the bits I don't need. Now, by the way, you can use, I'm using the selection key here and just deleting, but of course you can also go in with the eraser and just delete the bits you don't need. Now, by the way, notice there some of those guides disappeared, but those original ones didn't. That's because if you remember, those original ones we locked. Okay, and those ones that just disappeared then, I don't really need to keep them. They're just sort of were used temporarily to give me that edge. So it doesn't matter if they delete. Okay, I'm going to carry on and do the second inset. This one here, again, drag guides for everything, so I'm pretty sure that that's going to be close enough to 1 centimetre as well. Top one is a little deeper, so I'm going to come down to, what have we got there, 2 centimetres, probably, looks like it wants to go a touch further, so I'm going to make that 2.2. There we are, that looks like almost exactly in the right spot. Once again, same process again, draw a box, drag it over, doesn't matter where it goes to on that right hand side there because it won't matter in a minute. This is the only part that matters over here, and I guess the depth. And then, same thing, delete all the fill, at least delete it for the parts that are getting in the way, and then the final construction box for the corner. And that looks like it's pretty close to 5 centimetres, that one. And again, I'm sort of judging the corner point here and the corner point here. Drag a circle. There we go. Incidentally, I could be using some of these curve tools over here, the arc tools. I just find this circle technique is faster. Yeah, I've still got to do a bunch of deletes and things, but you've got to do that anyway with these other ones. In this particular instance, I think this is accurate because it shows you, that it's fitting properly. And I don't think it's any slower or faster, to be honest. Okay, so I'm just doing the final deletes now for those edges. And that's giving us everything we need. Now, the final bit that we just need to deal with, I'm just going to get rid of that fill there for a minute. Okay. Is this little edge here. It actually has got a tiny little radius on it, but it's so small, it's really not worth bothering about. So I'm just going to draw a connecting edge like that and now start to delete off those bits that we don't need. So there we go. And the final little bit of excitement is to go to that original middle guideline and just draw a line through the middle of the table up the top there. And what that's going to allow me to do is it separates that now into 2 halves. I won't need this half anymore because I'm going to copy this one and duplicate it and flip it. Okay, so I'm going to just select all of this, and I'll just do it with the eraser tool. Start to delete that and get rid of it. Get rid of all the edges, by the way. And once again, this is where it's handy to be able to turn off that original layer and just see if I've left any stray lines anywhere. Okay, which I haven't, so that's pretty good. I'm ready to carry on. Okay, I'm going to select all of this by not double but triple clicking. Okay, I'm just going to make a copy of that for a minute. I could do copy and paste, but I want to just make sure that stays in the same vertical plane. So I'm going to just get the move tool, click on an edge, start to move it, keeping an eye on that red line so it stays dead flat. And I'm also holding Option, or if you're on a PC, hold Alt, and it will copy it. Just make sure you move it far enough away so it's not accidentally overlapping itself. You just want to make sure it's not touching any of the existing line work. So I'm going to move it to about there. Okay, now to flip it, to mirror that, I'm just going to use the scale tool. Okay, I'm going to click that scale tool, I've got it selected, and as long as you move it from one of these side points, just start to drag it on top of itself and move over, and you'll find that it will sort of snap into place at -1. Okay, you'll feel it that it just sort of snaps into place there. If it doesn't, you can always type in -1. That basically means that -1 or 1 means 100%, so it's done -100%, which of course is a mirror reverse, which is exactly what we need. So there's the shape. Okay, and again, just go to the move tool now. Click on a point that's logical, so I'm going to join this edge to this edge, so I'm going to click on that point. And again, I'm just moving that across, making sure that that red little dotted line is visible, which means I know I'm moving it in the right plane. If it goes off that and goes black, it means you're not moving it in the right plane. So just make sure you're being careful with your mouse. And it should line neatly up perfectly with that. Okay, so I'm going to go into the middle now, and I no longer need that little joining line. So if I delete that, we've now got our table. And again, I can delete the plan to just see what we've got there. And that's basically, at the moment, all the important edges we need. And turn that back on now. And now we can convert this into a 3D shape by, I've just rotated my view around so I can see in a minute. I'm going to start to use the push-pull to bring that out. Okay, so I'll move to it around about there. Grab the push-pull, and I'll start by just grabbing that top surface, pull that out, and pull it to anywhere for the moment. I want it to be 32 because this side view tells us that it's 32 centimetres thick, so I can come down here and type in 32 centimetres. There it is. And I'll do the same thing with this surface. I'll just infer to that for the moment, okay, which is there. All right. Just rotate my view a bit to see that it's done that. It has. And then on the original table, it's actually got a little bit of an indentation. So I'm going to now grab the push-pull and push that back by, I reckon about 1 centimetre will do, like that. Okie doke. And there it is. And then we just got to do that on the reverse side of the table as well. Okay, so to do that, I just need to, this is again where layers are helpful. I can just turn off the visibility of that original layer, rotate my view around, and see what's happened here. Now, what has happened here is that, and this is very common, it's missing a surface. It's not anything we've done wrong here, it's just something to do with the way that it often draws off a plan view like that, because it's going off a flat surface. So we just need to put that surface back in. It's really easy to do. You just get your pencil, find a vertex, okay, just there for example, drag straight up, and it will fill it back in. It's a very common way to fix that problem when you see it, and it's a very common problem. And then just delete that line. Okay, and we do the indentation once again. Grab the push-pull, indent in by, I think it was 1 centimetre I used before. And there it is. So far so good. That's our table almost done. And the final thing we've got to deal with are the little side indentations. Okay, so I'll just bring back my plain view. It's these side details. And on the original table, that's basically recessed in a little bit. Okay. And so to do that, I just need to know what these measurements are, or roughly anyway. And so again, I'll get that accurate by going to my front view, like that. And I'm just going to get some rough estimates by drawing some little construction boxes over this drawing. So it looks like that depth there is, what am I getting, 5 centimetres. That's 4, so the line is somewhere in between, so I'm guessing that's about 4.5 centimetres deep. Alright, and so I'm just using the box tool to, I'm not actually drawing a box, I'm just using it to temporarily draw a box to get this measure. Okay, so that's 2, that's 3, so I reckon that width across there is 2.5. Right, so I'm just hitting escape to get out of that, so that's 4.5 and 2.5. Okay, now the other little thing that we've got to deal with here, I want to drag some guides, and easy enough to do from the side here. Okay, so there's the side of my table. I just worked out that I need to come in by 2.5, so I'll move in by 2 and then type in 2.5 and do the same thing there. Drag a guide, type in 2.5. Always remember to type centimetres if you're working in centimetres. I'm pretty sure the bottom of this is around about the same, so I'm going to do it the same down there, 2.5 centimetre. Okay, and now we have this problem at the top, because I worked out previously that it's meant to be about 4.5 from the top surface of the table. There's the top surface just here. But now we have this issue where I can't easily drag a guide, okay, because we've got a radius on this now. And so I've got no edge I can pull a guide from. But I can do this. I know that that edge at the back of the drawing is correct. So I can drag a guide down on this surface to 4.5, so 4.5 centimetres is there. Okay, and that gives me a reference point that hits the side of the table over here. Okay, so even though I couldn't accurately pull a guide from any surface here because it was a curve, it now doesn't matter because I've got a reference point for where that 4.5 measure was. So now I can drag a guide from any flat edge, like that one there, and come down and infer it to there. And that gives me what I now know to be exactly 4.5 from this top surface. Okay, I suppose I could have done from the front there as well, but either way, it now gives me the space I need to work with on the side. Okay, now, we could, of course, immediately carry on and draw a box, and I could do my radius edges, etc., like I've just done, and then I could push-pull to get this indent that we need to make. I went a bit too far there, so I should go a little less. Still going too far. How far is that? 1 centimetre. Okay, so it looks like our offsets. Right, so I'm going to have to be careful about how far I go in there, obviously. So that's 1 centimetre, so I'm going to go maybe 0.6 centimetre. That's better. Alright, so I could do that, but here's the problem. I need to make all these radiuses, which is going to take a little while to do, and then I've got to do it all again over this side because it repeats the same thing. So let's be a bit smarter about this and do it a different way. Okay, I'll just delete that thing I just drew, and this time I'm not going to draw it directly onto this existing geometry. I'm going to triple click that whole table and group it. Okay, so make group. And now I'm going to start to draw this shape that I was just making. But because I'm not drawing into the group, it means it's not going to interfere with the geometry. And what I'm ultimately going to do is I'm going to make a shape here that I can duplicate the shape in order to knock a hole in both sides in one go. basically. So I don't have to repeat this drawing of all the radius edges on the other side. So it's going to save a step. Okay, so I'll just rip through this process here because you've now already seen how to do the radiuses, so I'll do this pretty quickly. Rightio, so there's the shape we need. Happy days. And what I'll do now, and just to confirm it's not joined onto this table, okay, I could actually hide the table and we'd be left with just this. Alright, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this to, well, I don't know, what have we got there? 10, 8 centimetres, doesn't really matter, so long as you're making it thicker than the space just here. Okay, it's got to be thicker than what this indentation is, because we're going to use it to knock a hole in a minute, and we just need to make sure that it's thick. So if this was really, really thin, this part we just made, it wouldn't work. Right, so I reckon about that thickness will be more than enough. And I'm going to triple click that, group that, so right click, make group. So we've got the table grouped, and we've got that grouped. And now what I can do, the whole purpose of doing that was so that I can just grab this thing and now grab the move tool, start to move it. Notice I'm watching that red line to make sure that it's staying in the right plane, and I'm holding Alt or Option. If you're on a Mac, it's Option. Now again, just looking for that red line to make sure that it's behaving itself and staying in the right plane. So it's not moving off out into space or something, okay? And I'm going to let go of the mouse button first, so it makes a copy. Right, so it means I've basically made a spare over here that I'm going to use in a minute. All right. Okay, and now to knock the hole in this side, we do this. Grab this thing, okay? It's currently sitting flush on that surface there, okay, the surface of the table. So I'm going to now move that in very slightly. Now before, when I did that test previously, it looked like about 0.6 was the depth that I need. So what I mean by that is if I go too far, clearly this thing's going to puncture all the way through. And it's going to knock a hole. We don't want a hole. It's not meant to be a void, it's meant to be an indentation, a little recess. Alright, so I'm going to just do that move again and move it in by 0.6. So I'm going to come down here and type in 0.6 centimetres, like so. Righto, and now to knock the hole, I'm just going to get rid of the plan in the background there because we don't really need that in the way. Okay, I've now got this bit, I've got this bit, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a technique where I tell that, okay, to cut a hole in this automatically. And to do that, you select this bit first, that's the thing that's going to cut the hole. Shift, hold down Shift and click this, which is the object you want it to cut the hole in. And then you go up to the tools and you choose Solid Tools. And we're going to use Subtract. And when we do this, we will likely get an error. And you think, what the hell, why did that happen? It should be working, and it should. We've got two grouped objects, this should work. It's saying one or more of the selected objects is either not a solid or is locked. The solid lock, blah, 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 blah. Right, so it's saying we can't do it. Okay. Where the problem is, and this is often worth having a look at when you try and do this, you may have noticed sometimes when you're modelling you get these white surfaces, but every now and again you get these grey ones. Okay, now what's happened here is it's nothing we've done wrong, it's just the way the program works. It thinks that, if you like, the white surfaces are positive, and in a sense the grey ones are almost like a negative surface. It means that the polygons, these surfaces, are turned around the wrong way. Okay, now there is a longhand manual way of fixing that. You can go through and you can just click on them. I have to go into group mode here, and I can say reverse faces. Okay, so I've right clicked that and I'm saying reverse face, and you'll see as I do that it turns white. So I could do that painstakingly, go around and click that, but there is actually a better way, and I'll show you that. There's a really cool little free plugin, okay, that's called the Solid Inspector. Now, if you don't have that in your version of SketchUp, just go to the SketchUp warehouse, the extension warehouse, and go and search for Solid Inspector 2. And what that does is, if you then click the offending object, just select on it, and once you've installed Solid Inspector 2, go to Tools, Solid Inspector. It will tell you if it finds any problems, and it's saying there are. It's saying here there's 17 faces that are the wrong way. And then you just say fix all. And there you go. In one click, it's fixed it all. No errors, everything's shiny, and you get a smiley face. Isn't that cool? All right, so we'll close that. I'll do a quick look around. You'll see that that's now all nice and white. And it should be ready to work. So, try that again. Click the thing that's going to be the hole making object. Click the object with shift that you want to cut the hole into, like so. And then go to Tools, Solid Tools, and we're going to use Subtract. And it does that. Okay. Now that otherwise, without using that technique, would be a right pain in the backside to achieve. Okay, to model that from scratch is really difficult, whereas using that Solid Tools technique, you can get, and let's face it, that is actually a pretty complex little bit of geometry we've got going on there. It's not easy to model ordinarily, but using that technique, it's pretty straightforward. And so the idea, again, of having this one ready to go was that now all I need to do is, first of all, align that back to the face. Okay, so I'm going to move it until it says, I think that's the point there where it's saying on face in group. Okay, so I've moved, I'll do that again because it's important. I grabbed it from this edge here. Okay, I've got the move tool and I'm clicking and dragging until, and I've got the red line appearing, so I know it's moving in the red axis. And I move it until it says on face in group. And that way I know for sure it's actually touching now that surface. So they're perfectly aligned. And previously we moved it in by 0.6 of a centimetre, so I'm going to do that now. Okay, so I'm going to click and move it in by whatever, but type down here and tell it to be 0.6 centimetre. It's moved it exactly the right amount, and now I just do the same process I just did. Click this one first, so if I've got nothing clicked, click it, hold shift, click the table, go to Tools, Solid Tools, Subtract. And there is our beautiful Data-Rams 621 table. How about that? Isn't that fabulous? So the other layers and things are still there, obviously, but now, of course, I could delete that stuff I don't need, and there's our table. All correctly dimensioned and beautiful. So as I said, I think really the significant thing about a little tube like this one is really that technique for making radius edges. The rest of it, Solid Tools, okay, I mean, that was probably a little bit tricky, but it's not that hard to do. But that technique for radiuses, they will be used a fair bit in different models, and they're often a little bit annoying to make, but if you follow that procedure, they're actually pretty easy. And just keep in mind things like that idea of symmetrical objects. When you've got something that's just symmetrical, just make half of it. Make half and then flip it, all right? And it will save you half the time. Okay, so there we go. 61 table. Bye.